Welcome, please. Welcome to class. Let's again look at the principles of extension for the promotion of natural resource management. It's important that we first of all establish that agriculture has long been thought of as a technical issue involving the application of science and the transfer of the outputs of that science via a top-down process of technology transfer. Remember, we say top-down process because the technology comes from top and then down to the people. So, and then you need to again remind yourself, as we remind ourselves, that agriculture is farming and farming is people. So, the survival of agriculture is dependent on the survival of viable rural communities. So we're going to reflect on the principles of promotion of resource management. These principles were developed out of reflections, on-field expectations, on-field trials, on-field observations over years. Over years, they are called principles because they are intended to be regarded as general law or doctrine that is used as a basis of reasoning or a guide to action or behavior. Now, this status may not be accorded to them by all scientists. Yeah, it may not be applicable to all scientists, but then they do not have um, the status from a rural sociological perspective. It is majorly status that is based on real time agricultural extension perspective, not just from a social perspective. So we go for these principles. Now, the first principle is that farming is a sociocultural practice. The first principle is to acknowledge that farming is a sociocultural practice rather than a just technical activity. Farming becomes a way of life, a way of making a living that acquires a meaning far deeper than almost any other occupational identity. So, in that sense, farming is a vocation. As a social cultural practice, it is governed, informed, and regulated by social processes. Being aware of this fact and then reflectively thinking about what this understanding means will assist in the promotion of a sustainable agriculture for farmers in Nigeria. And let's just talk about farmers in Nigeria. Let's look at our community, farmers in Ikwo, farmers in Ebonyi State. So that's the first principle we need to know. Farming is a sociocultural practice. Then the next principle that we need to remember is that farmers are not all the same. The farming community is not homogeneous. When we say a people are not homogeneous, we are only saying that the people are heterogeneous. So there are many ways in which diversity can be observed within the farming community. We have the rich and the poor, we have the poor, the big and the small, we have the old and the young. You see the early in the life cycle, or those who are getting old, the late in the life cycle. There is the highly religious and the non-religious people. There are those who would support innovations as quick as possible without looking back. And there are those who will not have time for innovations. In your adoption stages, you must have heard of early adopters and laggers. So farmers can be categorized on every single variable that can be logically considered in conjunction with agriculture. This means there are no single problems, no single solutions, no single extension strategies, and no best medium that extension should solely utilize. You cannot say one size fits all. No, one strategy will not fit all. So instead of classifying farmers according to demographic or maybe according to structural setting in these communities, extension is usually advised to look at farmer specifics. Look at farmer specifics, not be in a hurry to lump farmers into groups. Look out for farmer specifics. So even when you have your idea for the community, you should be able to attend to individual needs. Adoption is also a socio-cultural process. Remember, we said first of all that farming itself is a socio-cultural process, but then adoption is also an important aspect of agriculture that the extension agent is gaining for. Rather than extension being a process of communication between science and then the only originators of ideas and farmers as passive adopters, extension needs to appreciate the adoption as a social process. The act of adoption is not an unthinking response to information provided by the extension. Rather, it is a deliberate decision by an individual farmer in response to a consideration of a wide range of issues. The farmer will consider so many things: cost, access, health implication. So many things will be considered, by the farmer before he now decides to adopt. And then adoption is not a singular act of an individual farmer in an isolated context. Just as we said the other time, the farmer may need to consult the neighbor, may need to consult the pastor, may need to consult the chief. So it's not just what the farmer arrives at solely by him or herself. Adoption takes place in a social context, with farmers discussing their ideas with other farmers. Much adoption occurs when the idea or practice to be adopted has become part of the normal concept of good farm management. So let's not forget that adoption is a cultural process. It involves so many persons, a socio-cultural process. Now, profit is not the main driving force of farmers. We know that most times people think that everything is about making profit, it's about the money. But contrary to the expectation of many economists, extensionists, and agricultural scientists, maximizing profit is not the most important thing in farmers' life. For instance, I know my father used to have a fish pond, then that going to see those fishes, swam in the water was enough to give him joy. I've seen farmers who just go to farm to see their vegetables, to see their plants growing, and they find relief, they find peace, they find joy. So it's not just about the profit, although the profit is also very important, but then farmers seek to make a reasonable income for a reasonable amount of work, taking a reasonable amount of risk. Note this: farmers seek to make a reasonable income for a reasonable amount of work, taking a reasonable amount of risk, with each farmer defining what is reasonable for themselves. Each farmer decides what is reasonable for themselves. The additional values and virtues of being a farmer, that is, the lifestyle factors, compensate farmers for those times when income may be less than what may be achieved by other endeavors. Appeal to economic incentive alone. Class, appeal to economic incentives alone is not sufficient to bring about change. Farmer, do this, you will get more money. Farmer, do this, you will become richer. Farmer, do this, you will get money to buy car. Appeal to economic incentives alone may not be enough to persuade farmers to adopt an innovation. So that's the fourth one. Let's look at the fifth one now. It is hard to be green when you are in the red. It is hard to be green when you are in the red. That's the fifth principle that we're going to look at. Although profit is not the main driving force, as we said in the fourth principle, and then the promotion of adoption of new technology requires more than just an economic dimension. It is true that it is hard to be green when you are in red. Sustainability requires an economic dimension as well as a physical dimension. So the farmer's health is important. The farmer's health is important. The farmer's emotion is important. If we look at it only from the farmer's money, if the farmer has money and is not healthy, extension work will become difficult. If the farmer has money and is not emotionally stable, he may not be able to understand whatever message you're trying to pass. The next principle is the sixth principle I want to look at in this class, which is doing the right thing is a strong motivational factor. Farmers do what they consider to be the right thing. They conform to a notion of good farm management. This notion is a complex entity and involves ideas about farming practice and environmental management or stewardship. But it is difficult to always know what good management entails. In the context of social research with farmers, it's been shown that different farmers have varying notions of good farm management. Good, good farm management is a social concept that farmers determine what constitutes good farm management through interaction with other farmers, with extension officers, whether it is private or private extension, through reading, journal publications, and others. It's good that farmers' desire to implement good farm management must be noted, and also be noted that it is that which is responsible for much adoption of otherwise economic environmental management. The next option of principle that we're going to look at in this session is that farmers don't distinguish environmental issues from other farm management issues. I'm sure we've discussed this in the class earlier on. The notion of doing the right thing, of good farm management, is a composite entity. Now, it includes production issues, environmental issues, and also social issues about being a farmer. Although many extension agencies are or have been differentiated into production issues or conservation issues, there is a meaningless differentiation for farmers. It's a meaningless differentiation for farmers, whether it be environmental issues or farm management issues, they lump everything together. So there is only one farm. So for them, farming practice have both production and environmental outcome. Extension advice must be integrated. That's why we're emphasizing on the need for extension to be closely aligned with issues related to climate change and the solution, because these farmers also may not know whether climate change is a management issue or an environmental issue. They lump everything together. The next principle, which should be number 8, I think, is that there is a desire to hand the farm on to one's children. Most farmers want to pass the farm on to their children in a better condition than they themselves received it. We say politicians want their children to replace them in politics. We hear appointments here going on, appointing former children of former presidents, former governors taking up new roles and then sitting tight for their children. We have ministers, trying to buy land, trying to do one thing or the other to position their children. You may be surprised to hear that even when the farmer seems to be poor and wretched, there is also that sincere intention, to hand over farms to the children. Except where it's emergency and money is required for one thing or the other, health issue, burial, and other things, and then you now see the farmer trying to maybe sell these farmlands. Otherwise, the farmer wants to hand over the land to the children. Now, this motivation exceeds any rational economic decision about the level of care to invest in improving the farm, because it makes any investment of labor, effort, money worthwhile. The major problem is this: when farmers believe that their children will not return to the farm because the motivation for investment in improvement is diminished. If a farmer feels that, oh, my child is going to become a medical doctor, then he's not coming to farm. He will not be motivated to develop the farm on a sustainable base. It is difficult to know as well precisely when or if children will return to the farm. Of course, we know that the reasons why it is difficult to know if children will return to the farm will include: one, sometimes children who have professional jobs in the city and have said that their adult lives, that they will never return to the farm, actually will do so when the aging parents pass away or announce that the farm is to be sold. So you may think that your child is in Abuja, is in maybe is in Port Harcourt, and may never return to the village. But then before you know it, as the father gets old or dies, you see the young man coming back to the village sometimes. Although people don't wish to come back to the village, but then it's important that we state the true state of things because we are discussing extension. At other times, even when the children make it clear that they are not interested and it may be highly unlikely that they would return to the farm, the parents may still harbor a secret belief that the children will return. So that's the second point, the second reason why it is difficult to predict. So even when the child is saying, "Oh, I'm not coming back to this farm, I'm not interested in agriculture, I will not work here," parents still harbor this secret belief that they would come back. Yeah, parents decide to have children remains on, or at least for them to return to their career. And this also affects the farmer. The next principle that we want to look at is sustainability means staying on the farm. Extension agencies want to promote sustainability in agriculture, but they tend to regard this more in terms of biophysical issues and sometimes in terms of economic issues. For farmers, the social significance of farming means that the social dimension of sustainability is central. Sustainability is meaningless unless it involves the ability to stay on the farm. For farmers, therefore, sustainability means something along the line of we as a family on our farm in the future. So, whatever you're talking about, 2030, 2040, 2060, the farmer is looking at it as, oh, we as a family, we are on our farm in the future. So that's what matters for them in sustainability. So you need to learn that principle, and in your extension teaching, keep that at the back of your mind. The physical environment dimension of sustainability is important, but a continued ability to make a living is more important. Now, looking after the land or stewardship was always part of the notion of good farm management. And so for farmers, sustainability is not a new concept. Only the physical expression of the management practices that sustainability involves has changed, and many of them are currently being contested. Of course, you know. The next principle that we shouldn't forget is that women are an integral part of the farm. Because when you look at most data coming from field, especially here in Ebonyi State, you know that you will observe that majority of farmers in Ebonyi here are women. So a farm is really the embodiment of a single individual male farmer. The word farmer is a convenience that has an established romanticized meaning that belies the reality of farm management. Farms are often complex partnerships involving financial affairs in the running of the farms and then involving the entire farm households. So you need to know that in your extension teaching practice, women must be recognized as active participants in agriculture. If you ignore the role that women has played in agriculture, you then may not get a good result. This role has also been increasing and will increase further in the future. Even in individual situations where there has been a strong division of labor, the role of women in the private sphere in the household has been essential to the survival of the farm. Extension needs to acknowledge the role of women on the farm and needs to consider how the needs of women can be met. The next is that stages in life cycle of a farm family and family accomplishments are significant factors. You will need to know this, that the stage in the life cycle of a farm family affects their need for household and disposable income. For instance, a young family will need something different from a family that is getting older. Their income and their potential, and then their potentials are also different, and this affects finance available for other purposes. But stage in the life cycle also affects commitment to the future, with young farmers being more committed to a future on the farm than either families late in the life cycle or young, maybe single farmers. You look at adoption of innovations, digitalization, use of digital tools in agriculture. You will see that young farmers are more interested, because they have more prospect, they have more years to farm. Older farmers may not be interested because they think they are winding up their farm career. And then the last, but not the least, that we're going to consider, there are so many of them here, mainly so many of them that we need to know. But then let's just look at the last one, that farmers construct their own knowledge. It's a mistake to believe that only science can create knowledge. A very big mistake. It's not only science that can create knowledge that is transferred to the public via extension. All individuals and groups create knowledge about their own experience of the world, and this includes farmers. It implies that the information that is transmitted through extension is evaluated against other information, knowledge, and belief held by each individuals. You are telling farmer that the GMO seeds are very good, and then you want to say that being ignorant of the rumors in the society that GMO foods are meant to control birds in Africa. No, you will need to integrate what you know with what is already spreading in the society. Nothing is accepted without evaluation. So as the community is becoming more empowered, and more skeptical with information coming from so many places, it's a generation of social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, a whole lot of them. Science does not automatically have credibility and legitimacy. It's no longer the days of we believe science and we believe science whole and entire. No, people now even evaluate the outcome of science. Farmers create their own knowledge through experimentation and trials, and through their own theories. The knowledge of science, that knowledge created by scientists is used by farmers when it is consistent with their own understanding. If it does not, align with their own understanding, it becomes difficult. Sometimes the farmers create knowledge through the process, of local conditions, and this must not be ignored by the extension agents. Thank you so much. That's our own bit on the principles for the promotion of natural resource management.